Austin Faith Dialogue at the Crossroads of Religion and Life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interactions with the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Area Interreligious Ministries in cooperation with KNVA. Join us now for Austin Faith Dialogue.
Welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Carl Gronberg, host of the program. And there was one who wrote many, many, many thousands of years ago, "Faith in God without works is dead." On this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue, we're going to talk about doing the work, God's work. And we have with us Major Stephen Ellis of the Salvation Army, who is relatively new to the Austin community. We welcome you, Major Ellis, and glad that you are here.
Very glad to be here.
You came to us about 10 months ago, is that right?
Last October.
And you have, before that, were where?
I've been with the Salvation Army in several communities in the southern United States, mainly in Atlanta, in Baltimore, in Charlotte, in Alabama and Mississippi, in Oklahoma, and a couple of cities in Germany right after the wall came down, in Nuremberg and Bremen.
That's fascinating. We want to talk about that as we visit with our Austin Faith Dialogue community. But I was going to ask you about when you came 10 months ago. I talked to you then and said, how about coming on Austin Faith Dialogue? And you said, oh, give me some breathing space. I'd like to catch my breath and get my feet on the ground and be able to get through the Christmas season. And many of us, when we think about the Salvation Army, we think about Christmas time. But the Salvation Army is involved in so many other things for the community, not only this community, but the other communities that you mentioned. Tell us a little bit about what the work is of the Salvation Army.
Well, the work of the Salvation Army is really summed up in our mission statement, which is very broad, which is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, which means a whole range of explicitly religious ministries, and our mission is equally to meet human needs in His name without discrimination, which means anything that meets human needs that we can do in the context of a community. That's what we want to be about. So it lends itself to almost anything that does good for people.
You are rooted in the Christian community, and indeed, though, you reach out to a broad section of society, people with faith and people without faith. Tell us a little bit about some of the religious things that the Salvation Army does that express the Christian community.
Well, we are, first of all, and most Americans are not aware of this, we are a worshiping community. I'm a member of a Salvation Army congregation, and we worship together on Sundays and Wednesdays, and we have Bible studies, and we have praise services, and we have evangelistic services, and those whole range of activities that you would have in a church, but they're more oriented towards bringing in outsiders. They're explicitly geared towards reaching out to those who might not be reached by other worshiping communities and being open. We started on the streets in London, and actually just 24 years after that, in 1889, we started on the streets here in Austin at 6th and Congress downtown.
Excuse me, Steve, but in 1889, you started on the streets of London, is that correct?
No, 1865.
1865 in London.
In London, and then just 24 years later, the Salvation Army Hallelujah Lassies were on the streets here in Austin, on Congress Street, 6th and Congress, 11th and Congress, beating the drum, which over a couple of years later, even Austin maybe then wasn't quite weird enough to accept that, because they passed an ordinance asking us to be a little quieter.
That's great. And Austin had not really gotten that identification of being a weird place where all people could make lots of noise.
Maybe not, maybe not.
And they came to Austin, and then since then, the Army has done so many marvelous things to benefit this community. But I think you're right. Many folks do not think of you as a worshiping community where people gather together to worship within their tradition and to praise God. What about you? Did you grow up in the Army?
I grew up in the Army. My parents, who since retired, were Salvation Army officers all their adult life.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up mainly in Atlanta. my folks served on a number of appointments in different Salvation Army centers, so I moved around the southern United States growing up. But they served the longest during my childhood in Atlanta, and I went through high school, graduated from high school there.
When you were growing up, do you have siblings?
I do. I'm the youngest of four.
Do all the siblings participate in the life of the Salvation Army?
I am more so than the others. My brother moved out where there's not a Salvation Army community, and so he's a member of another church. But you know, the Salvation Army started explicitly not to be a denomination, but to be a movement of believers who wanted to work together for a goal that they could all agree on, which was to reach those that in their individual churches were not being reached.
And to be evangelistic in that sense, is
Yes.
that right? And sharing good news with people.
Exactly.
So besides being a worshiping community and having a congregation that you belong to, and having grown up in this, and obviously affirming the values and the heritage and the faith of your parents, also the Army is doing good, promising to do good. Tell us a little bit about the promise the Army makes to be non-discriminatory.
Well, all our services are available equally to anyone without profession of any particular faith or participation in an explicitly religious service. Downtown, for instance, in our shelter, there's no question that requires you to participate one way or another. We offer Bible studies, and in fact, different members of different congregations come in to help participate in the ministry, but the services, food, shelter, counseling, help in getting people back on their feet are available regardless of whether or not someone chooses to participate in those explicitly religious activities.
Are you able to express to us what you have seen? You've grown up in this faith community, and you've watched people who have been struggling with issues in their lives. What do you see happening today in the society we know of Austin, Texas? What's going on with people? For instance, I mentioned it before we came on the air that I was recently at your facility at 8th and H's and went in the alleyway. And I've been there many times, bringing things and bringing people. But I noticed that there was a larger group of people there than I'd ever seen before. Have your needs grown? Are there more people who are looking for assistance and help?
Well, there's certainly the annual counts of the homeless that have been occurring have been going up. The count this past January was the highest that it's ever been, substantially higher than in previous years. We are certainly seeing more people, and you know, the Salvation Army has been at our current location for almost 20 years, and in that time, some other services, such as the Austin Resource Center for the Homeless, have come into place in that same area. So along with people getting assistance at our individual building and in our ministries, there are people getting service from related ministries in that same area.
And so there's a partnership that goes on.
There is.
And how do you work it so that there's not duplication, so that if someone comes in, I hear people saying we have a food pantry and clothes closet in our congregation, and I hear people saying, well, they're just working the system, so to speak. How is it that you and the other people doing good in that particular part of Center Austin, how do you work on making certain that they're not working the system?
Well, first let me say that we want to give the benefit of a doubt to folks. On the other hand, we do what we can to eliminate doubt by sharing information, and there's a database system that's available that a lot of the providers work with, and that cuts down on that duplication dramatically, and those sort of things. But when there's doubt, we want to presume that the person is being honest, that they're in need of assistance, and we'll provide the assistance that we can.
I'm wondering about walking us through when a person comes. If a person is really hurting and they're down and out, and they think, I've got to go someplace. I don't have a roof over my head. I don't have food for my tummy. Where should I go? Well, I'll go to the Salvation Army. If they've never been to the Army, what are the steps that go through? Where do they go?
They come to our center at 8th and Netches, 501 East 8th Street, and we've been open for 7,086 consecutive days, 24 hours a day. So you come to the building, and until the fire marshal says that we are beyond capacity, then we bring people in.
What is your capacity?
Well, we have 274 beds. But often we stretch beyond that, and in fact our average nightly population downtown this year is 271. So there are many nights when, particularly during the cold weather, when we've had additional folks out, and wherever we can find place to put a mat out, then we've done that.
A person then comes and they say, I need a place to stay. Is there an intake person? Is there a counselor? Are there social workers? Are there people to listen to their story?
There's a very basic intake at the time of entry, which is often after hours. But then during regular office hours, Monday through Friday, then the person would see one of the caseworkers and get an initial orientation. And then they have 7 days to kind of sort things out and decide where am I going from here, and then we can enroll them in other programs to help them move on into self-sufficiency.
You are the area commander, is that correct?
Yes.
And you told me before we went on the air that no one really knows what that means, but it means that you're the head man. And how many people do you have in your staff?
We have at any given time with folks coming on internships and so forth. It varies a bit, but basically around 90 folks. And then we also have a facility that I'm not directly responsible for, but help coordinate in this city, and that is the Adult Rehabilitation Center, which is where you see the thrift stores, the family thrift stores. They support that program, and they support a rehabilitation center on South Congress that provides recovery assistance for 118 men all year round.
We're going to want to talk about what that means, rehabilitation center, and what goes on in that rehabilitation center. But, you know, I think about you, a young man that you are, and been here 10 months. Have there been any surprises? Anything that has shocked you?
Not shocking. I've really had a blast in getting to know a little bit of Austin. When I got transferred here, everyone was coming up and congratulating me. Oh, you love Texas, you love Austin.
A weird place.
And the diversity is marvelous. The breadth of experiences that you can have here, and especially for me, the depth of people caring about other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it is people from different traditions and different beliefs and coming from different points in their life, but able to come together and have the concerns that God laid on our hearts in the Salvation Army through the Bible and through the ministry of Jesus Christ to preach to the poor, to take good news to them.
Doing the most good. That's a promise, right?
That is
and we invite you to be back with us in Austin Faith Dialogue in the second half of the program. And we're going to continue to talk to Major Ellis about the work of the Salvation Army and how you might participate in working along with them. Please stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue. Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue. Good to have you with us. We're talking with Major Stephen Ellis of the Salvation Army here in Austin, and we're discussing the theme that the Salvation Army has of doing the most good. And I was asking on the break about where does this come from? And you mentioned to me that this is a national theme of the Salvation Army. And it's more than just an arrogant statement, as you said. This is really a promise. What do they mean, the Salvation Army, by doing the most good?
Well, part of it goes back to our national commander back during World War I, whose name was Evangeline Booth, daughter of the founder of the Salvation Army, and she was responsible for the Salvation Army across the United States. And she said there's no reward equal to doing the most good to the most people. And that is something that in very recent years we've taken on as a promise and a pledge and a desire that we want to encapsulate what we want to be about day by day. When I get up in the morning, it runs through my mind, how can I today do the most good with who I am and the resources that the public in this area has entrusted to the Salvation Army.
Her name was Evangeline?
Evangeline Booth, yes.
And evangelical, Evangeline, angel, good news.
Yes.
And the Salvation Army then sees themselves as a ministry of good news to people.
Absolutely.
What is that good news? What's the good news they're bringing? Besides the message of Jesus Christ, which is a part of your proclamation, what else are they saying to people who are, quote unquote, down on their luck? People that are hurting economically, emotionally, spiritually, physically. How can we bring good news? How can the Army bring good news to those people?
A lot of the impact that the Salvation Army has had over the years is by bringing people who have been down and out, who have been literally in the gutter, who have been, down at the bottom of their lives and in despair, and how they, through faith and through repentance, have turned their lives around and have been able to build a life for themselves, and most of all, to build a life for others where they are ministering to others. We became a movement because William Booth, the founder, William and Catherine Booth, I should say, it was really the couple.
Husband and wife.
Husband and wife, absolutely, who made this happen. But they saw quickly that they couldn't do it, and they and the band of other ministers and other church folks that they were working with there in the East End of London, they couldn't do it, but that the most effective people were those who themselves had been lifted up through this ministry, had turned their lives around, and had gotten red hot for Jesus. And they were so effective in speaking to and being examples to the people that they had formerly been in the gutter with. And so the Salvation Army to this day wants to bring people up, and a certain number of those people choose in the long term to continue. They want to give to others something of what they've received through the grace of the community, and that happens to be funneled through the ministry of the Salvation Army.
What I'm intrigued by is that there they start on the East End of London, is
Yes.
what you said. And the year again was
1865.
65. And started in a small group. And there has to be a story about William and Catherine Booth, is
Yes.
that right? And the vision they had. But it's really become an international movement then. Seeing themselves within, not setting themselves apart from the Christian community, but seeing themselves as a movement within the Christian community.
Yes.
To bring a certain unique way of ministry. Where has the Army gone from the East End of London? Where are places besides 25 years later, did I hear you right, going all the way to Austin,
Texas, yes.
Where else has the Army gone?
Well, we're in about 112 countries right now. The fringe depends on whether or not you count some places where we are really fledgling or returning. Of course, during the communist domination of Eastern Europe, we were made illegal in those countries. But we are in most of the countries of the world, all around the world, from Korea and Hong Kong, around the globe to South America, and actually numerically we're strongest in Africa.
And when you go into those areas with those ethnicities, what are some of the things that happen to people of the Army? Do they become a part of that culture? You're wearing, well, what are you wearing? This is a uniform that we see often, yes, and associate with people of the Salvation Army, but when a person would go to Korea, would they wear something like this? Or when they go to Africa, would they wear something like this? Or would they change?
There's a little variation for climate. We have countries where it's gray. We have countries where it's white. But otherwise, it's the same. It's just adapting to the amount of sun that they have to bear.
I understand. I'm wondering, what are some, I see the S here, of course. Can you explain to our viewing audience a little bit about what your uniform speaks of? It's a nice suit. The women who are a part of the Salvation Army also wear the same type of,
yes,
of suit. What does this stand for?
Well, the S has been understood differently. Save to serve, save to save. One time when one of our officers was on a flight in Africa, and it was commandeered by communist or Marxist rebels, then they understood that it meant Soviet soldier, and they were very friendly to her. But most often we think save to serve and save to save.
I really like that idea, save to serve. That works well. And then you have here on your shoulder something else. Is that a sign of your office, your rank?
That is, in the Salvation Army, it's just by seniority, and now a new officer. I was a lieutenant, and then after 5 years became a captain, and then further down the line you become a major.
And William Booth set up this type of image of Army with the uniform and the, yes, different type of ranks.
And it was in a time when military organizations were on the public mind, particularly in the British Empire, and it especially grew out of a desire to be efficient. William Booth came out of a church background that had already had a lot of overlay of committee work and decisions by committees, referring recommendations to committees, to other committees, and they found that the opportunities for work, opportunities to spread the message and to spread the work were such that they didn't have time for all those layers of bureaucracy. So William Booth was, for a time, known as the General Superintendent, and that nicely dovetailed into becoming the General. And it kind of, it was actually one of his premier evangelists who called himself a captain and referred to William Booth as a general, and it kind of caught on from there.
One of the things the Army has done, from my observation, is that you've always embraced all people to be a part of your service. And in Austin, that's true also, correct? You have a board.
Yes.
And does not the board reflect so that the viewing audience, if they would like to be a part of the servanthood, whether they be from another religious tradition or heritage, but they believe in serving people and helping people live their lives better, they could become a part of your ministry?
Absolutely. Anyone who finds a part of what the Salvation Army does that they are in sympathy with, and they believe that that is a good way that they can do something that's on their heart, we'd love to have them.
And that's something I also have always appreciated about the Salvation Army, is that you respect all faith communities, and that you don't try to make people, if they say, well, we want to serve in the kitchen or we want to give money at Christmas time, you don't say to them, well, you have to give up your background or your heritage, your faith, and become like us. You're so welcoming. Where does that hospitality, that welcoming spirit come from?
Well, it comes from a realization that we're all God's people. Now, I have to balance that. We do believe that faith in Jesus Christ is essential, and we hope that all people will come to that. But we don't believe that everybody has to start there, and in order to be a part of what we're about.
Mm-hmm. As you look at your 10 months in Austin, you mentioned that you've really been pleased with the welcome and the experience you've had in Austin. Does that mean you plan to spend the rest of your years here, Stephen Ellis?
I have no idea. You know, we're still a militaristic or an authoritarian organization, and we get orders and we go where we're ordered. And so last September I was sitting at my desk in Atlanta. I got a call and they said, "You're going to Austin, Texas." And a few weeks later I was in Austin, Texas.
And you said, "Yes, sir, I'm
I
packing
said,
my
"Yes,
bag."
sir, yes.
Did you go home? You have a family, and we need to tell
Yes.
the viewing audience of Austin Faith Dialogue a little bit of family, because they called you up and said, "Major, you're going to Austin, Texas," and did you go and talk to your beloved? Tell us a little bit about to whom you're married.
I'm married to Susan, who's been my wonderful partner and supporter since 1984, and she in the Salvation Army officer service couples, so she's also a major, she's also a minister of the gospel, and she works right alongside me, or I work alongside her, and we each find our different mission generally, or our different tasks. And we have one son, Sam, who's in college, so he got to come back for Thanksgiving and find out where his new home was.
And Sam now will be going off to college again, and then
Yes,
maybe be coming back again at Thanksgiving time.
He's in his 4th year, right?
What would you want to say to the viewing audience of Austin Faith Dialogue about the future of the Salvation Army in this community?
Well, there's a concern in my heart that was kind of encapsulated by some of the news recently with the bridge collapse in
Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, that here, and of course we don't know the cause, and just a bit of speculation, because we know it's happened in other circumstances where we get concerned about doing new things, and we have all sorts of ideas about expansions, and meanwhile some basic fabric, in this case of the road, gets neglected, and maybe it goes on too long.
Maybe what you could say to us is that as you look to the future, that you're willing to share that and come back to Austin Faith Dialogue and tell us about the future. And we hope that all of you in the Austin Faith Dialogue community will think of the Salvation Army, and that you'll be willing to work with them to do the most good. Thanks for being with us. Continue the work of the kingdom of God. Peace and blessings be to you.